Thanks for joining us. This is hashtag the African Dream. My name is Oral Ofori, your host and producer of your favorite human interest chat show. We're waiting for our guests to join us, but let me tell you a little bit about today's show. We'll be joined by Jonathan Shroyer. Jonathan Shroyer worked to develop Officium Labs back in 2019, which was acquired by Arise Virtual Solution in 2021. Jonathan is now the Chief Customer Experience Innovation Officer at Arise Virtual Solutions. There, he leads the gaming and consulting verticals and runs the CX Lab in San Francisco. Shroyer has 2 decades of experience building companies and leaders up. CIO Journal, a publication of the Wall Street Journal, named Shroyer among its top CX professionals of 2022. Today, he's going to be joining us, and we appreciate you for joining us as well. Start off. So besides what I read in your introduction to our audience, talk a little bit about yourself, assuming I left something out, so our viewers can get a personal, connection with you.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, okay? Can you hear?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was an echo there for a second, but I think when I switched the camera.
Good.
Yeah, for some reason there's an echo, I'm not sure, but I'll do my best. I'm Jonathan Shroyer. I'm the Chief CX Innovation Officer at Rise Virtual Solutions. And we're kind of building out the future of service the last 20 years. I started a company, Officium Labs, and recently sold to our Rise Virtual Solutions last November. And I think, Oral, you and I caught up and talked about the future of citizen services, embassy services, and had a great connection. Happy to be here.
Cool. So, customer experience, customer service, what is it to you? We know you're into it a lot, so let's hear it from the horse's own mouth.
I think for me, customer service and customer experience is really about how do you think about the human that is purchasing that product? How do you think about their entire journey? Where are their potential challenges in that journey to get back to what they love, which is that product that they purchased, right? And so I think that if you use technology and you use humans together, technology can bring the joy, but the humans bring the engagement that really drives brand retention, brand loyalty, and brand affinity. So I think that's what it's kind of all about.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. What are some of the major changes you've noticed in the world of customer experience, customer relations since the advent of COVID that institutions should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to think about. I think the first thing to think about is, for the longest time, working remotely was a slowly burgeoning part of different ways to work. And the Rise invented the idea in space back in '99, like, hey, one can work remotely, decentralized. Well, what COVID did is it expedited that, right? It enabled that capability for a lot of different service areas to be able to work from home in a hybrid way. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing that a lot of companies are being built, technologies are moving forward that helps that environment exist. And as a byproduct of that, what you see is that a lot of companies are thinking about how can I do the same thing for my customers? How do I build a seamless way to communicate with my customers in an async way, as well as kind of a live way? So I think that's just like, I think the third thing that's interesting is, especially with the headwinds of the economic issues that are upon us right now, is really thinking about how do we bring that value to customers while we optimize our business in a way. And so I think those are the three things that I relate.
That's quite interesting, and I guess COVID taught us how much we can do with what seemed to have been a limitation prior to COVID. Now, the whole human and customer experience has found ways in which it can get things done with little resources, and maybe those are great things that you had just shared. So we how do I put this? We'd love to hear your views uh, and advice on customer service experience in diplomacy as far as embassies are concerned, where consular services, brings the embassy in direct touch with the public who are mainly, seeking assistance with visas, passports, immigrations, and other, issues as far as diplomacy is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about diplomacy and we think about the experience they have, and we talked about it a little bit in the article, is it's anyone that's going to the embassy is going because they have a challenge or an issue that cannot be solved online or in a digital way, right? And so I think when you think about embassy support or the embassy services experience, what you want to do is you want to ensure that you you can get them through the process to get them back to what they want to do, whether it's getting their passport renewed, whether it's immigration status, whether it's solving an escalation issue that may have happened at the border or whatever it is, right? So you really want to think through that because one, it helps them get back to what they want to do, which is their day-to-day life. And then I think secondarily, it decreases the load of escalated types of issues on perhaps the diplomats or the leaders at the embassy, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So there's this school of thought that is of the opinion that as embassies or diplomatic institutions, they have the diplomatic license to do things as they see fit to champion the cause of their entity outside their country in this foreign or that foreign country where they are. But some people are like, do they even really need to care or pay attention to customer service or customer experience? Can't they just lay down the rules and get stuff done and then have people follow them? What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I think when you think about it from that perspective, it's kind of saying that the the embassy or the country has all the power, and the citizens, have no power. Say, oh, this is the process, follow the process, but don't get what you need, right? That that if you were to bring that into like the consumer and you were to say, hey, okay, well, this is the product and take it or leave it, we're not going to do anything to help you, right? I think you would have a lower adoption on kind of the product and in probably lower revenue, lower retention, and so forth. So I think in the embassy space, if people want to travel or if there's certain things they have to go to the embassy for, that's the only place to really do it. But I do think that like embassies have an opportunity to think about, well, how can I make this as seamless as possible for the citizens, but then also as seamless as possible for the people that are working in the embassy? Because if you lay down the law and say, okay, this is the process, you have to follow it, that's going to put a lot of tension between citizens or the customers of the embassy and the embassy themselves. And generally, embassies want to be seen as a place that can be trustworthy, a place that you go for safety, you go to get what you need. And so I think you have to be really careful about just kind of saying, my way or the highway, because it could cause some tension, which will put a lot of stress on those folks that work in the embassy, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much for that response, Jonathan. So let's do another question for the benefit of embassies and diplomacy. Now, research shows that offline relationships precede online relationships. In relating to foreign and local publics, how does this affect the chain of command from the security at the gate, for instance, at an embassy, to the ambassador at the top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the more that you can make it possible for citizens to do things or customers to do things on offline. And when I say offline, I mean outside of the embassy, so really online in a self-service way or in a digitized way, then the less stress you're going to put on the embassy staff themselves as they work through like passport control and the other services, because you'll have lower demand, right? And then that's one piece. I think the second piece is when a customer or citizen comes to the embassy or needs to have, go through passport services, it'll be for harder issues that aren't simple. And so it'll give the embassy worker, an interesting set of purpose because they're like, oh, we're really helping this citizen get through this really challenging issue, right? Rather than, oh, I'm just, I'm renewing the passport kind of thing. So I think that's one piece. And then I think the third piece of it is if you set it up where you have a good, strong online presence, digitization, only the most difficult issues come to the embassy, then the escalation rate to the diplomat or to the leader of the embassy is going to be less, and it gives them the ability to be more flexible on making exceptions. So if you're the head of the embassy and you get 1,000 escalations versus 10 escalations, it's going to be harder for you to be more flexible and make some exceptions for what you think is right.
Thanks for that response. Based on what you've said, what can institutions like embassies and just everyday businesses be wary of, or what are some of the things that they might be doing that might be hurting their customer experience or customer relations that they are probably not aware of or might be taking for granted?
Well, I mean, I think that very similar to an embassy, any product should really think about like where are our touch points with our customers, and are we making it too hard for our customers to get the joy that they want out of the product they purchased? And where are we making it too hard? And in some cases, is it intentional because we want them to do something, like we want to adjust the behavior? And in that case, that might be true. Gaming is a great space where sometimes they intentionally make parts of the game harder to push competition and so forth. But in general, I think most products should really think what can the customer do for themselves? What is critical that they need to engage with the human or technology to do? And then what are the most critical things that need to get escalated to get solved? And I think if you think about from a ratio standpoint, a really good product has 60 to 70, maybe 80% of the things that the consumers can just do themselves. They can do it and get back to what the product is. Then you have maybe 20, 25% in the middle, and then the 2 to 5% at the top. It's kind of the way that I've noticed best in class.
That's interesting. So let's move or shift some of the responsibilities from the entities to the people at the end of the line who receive the service, like the customers, the clients. What can they do on their part to help make the whole customer experience thing smoother as they go into get a service or a product, for instance?
Well, I mean, I think what was interesting, you talked about moving the responsibility away, right? And I think that's one way to kind of think about it. I think the second way to think about it is a lot of consumers want to have more power over their account. They want to have more power over the product that they own. They want to have the ability to do a lot of different things without having to engage with another person. And we're seeing that as a behavior kind of across the multiple different verticals and industries. So I think it's more about like understanding what type of power and what type of seamless experience that your customers want, and then providing that to them. That way they don't have to. I mean, for example, I don't use cable anymore, but I have an internet service, right? And I never want to call my internet service. I just want it to work. So if it doesn't work, I want to figure out why it doesn't work myself. And then worst case scenario, if I have to call, then I'll call. And I think there's a lot of, you think about millennials and Gen Zs, they want to be met where they're at. They actually don't want to do phone calls a lot, but they want to just solve everything for themselves. And then if they can't solve it, then they'll talk to the company. So I think we're seeing just consumer trends changing on what their definition of empowerment is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And you talk about the fact that a lot of consumers and people getting service want to get stuff done without too much personal interaction and engagement. Um, um, in order to make this process smoother, what are some of the things that you suggest be done by entities who engage customers at a large volume on a daily basis? What could they
Yeah.
do on the online front to take some of
Mhm.
the interaction load off, since it'll benefit them so they can get more stuff done at their end, and it'll benefit the customer since they don't have to have the producer in their face all the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think generally, if you two things that I would recommend. I think one is design the experience that you want your customers to have, because oftentimes product leaders forget to include the customer journey inside of the design experience. Like, what's this journey that I want my customer to go through? What does success look like? And how does that success then be as seamless as possible? So really designing the experiences you want, as opposed to just building a cool product and releasing it to the market and hoping for the best kind of thing, right? So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is CX or customer service leaders need to have a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is they have a perspective that a lot of the product leaders don't have. And so in the companies that I've worked at where you've been able to get a CX leader to have a seat at the table, what's interesting about that is that companies make changes at the dev and design level. So when it gets to the release level from a product standpoint, then those changes never turn into issues, right? So you mitigate a ton of issues in that format and that process. So it's pretty powerful, I think.
Quite interesting. Now, suggest ways for embassies and other diplomatic institutions would break bad news to customers and clients. What are some of the ways you would suggest? It's like this is really bad news. How do we?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think you kind of have to be just really empathetic, don't you? You have to realize that, hey, this is going to cause a lot of anxiety, right, for the family, whoever it is, or the person. And so, if you were in their position, like, how would you want it to be told about this decision? And you can be empathetic, you can be sympathetic and thoughtful, and still deliver the bad news without, having to over apologize. I think sometimes people want to over apologize when it's bad news, and I think that's not the right way for brands to approach things. So I think because sometimes you just have to deliver what somebody will determine as bad news. And so I think if you're empathetic, if you really think through and kind of practice how you're going to communicate that, maybe even talk to a coworker or somebody that has gone through that, so they can say, well, how would you want to flirt that, and then go through the process and deliver it. And then just as you're delivering the news, leave space for them to ask questions, leave space for them to express emotion, and just be there with them, and then thank them for their time, right? And I think that's kind of all you can do in those types of situations. Because if you just say, oh, this is the decision, goodbye, like that leaves a really bad taste from a human experience in their mouth, if that makes sense.
So be empathetic and be considerate. Put yourself in their shoes, and you know, let the bad news, be delivered, but then let it be done in a way that would make them, have a good taste in their mouth about your product, your service, or your institution. That's
Yeah, I
quite
think so. I think that's the way to do it.
yeah. Yeah. For instance, most entities, business providers, service providers, have say call centers where
Mm,
customers will
mm.
call us in a result if they can get what they need online or on the website. And this is an entity, for instance, that is receiving a high volume of calls and maybe emails. Let's narrow it down to the calls. what is a decent amount of time to spend on the phone per call, and where would you think this is like way too many minutes? Let's cut it off and move on to the next caller.
Well, I think it's interesting. Every product probably has a different ideal call length, right? So if you're calling your internet provider because the internet's down, it's probably a technical support issue, right? And so that could take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to resolve it. If you're, contacting, a retailer because you need to get a shipping label, that's probably a 5 minute or less call. So I think what you have to think about as an entity is how long does it take you to properly resolve that customer issue the first time? And then if you get, let's say, 1,000 data points of how long that takes, then find the median of that. And I think that's probably a good way to think about it, because then what you're doing is you're building an operation based off of resolution. And resolution has been determined to be the highest contributor to satisfaction and to rebuy. And so I think that would be the way I would go about thinking about it.
Interesting. How can people find you on social media? Like, where do they go to follow you, or do you have a website that you can share so people can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, Jonathan Shroyer, at Arise Virtual Solutions. You can probably Google me, Jonathan Shroyer. I have lots of content online as well. If you're interested in listening to some more of my thoughts, or if you want to hang out, I love catching up with people and talking with folks. It's so interesting. Like, I love how customer experience, is pervasive across all industries and verticals. And talking about, the embassy and thinking about the citizen experience and the customer experience, I think is a super powerful way to think about customer experience. So I appreciate the time.
We appreciate your time and your expertise, Jonathan, and especially coming out on a holiday to make time to, chat with us. There are lots and lots more questions we'd love to ask, but we're pressed for time, and so we look forward to yet the opportunity to continue this unfinished business. But
Yep.
so much for joining us. Are there any last words for our viewers? Any tips?
Just something to think about is I always think about, as a leader, what is the consumer or what does the customer need in 5 to 10 years? And then how are you building that today? And so I think that's a simple mindset shift that I encourage leaders to think about, because that will help them build the things they need to do to create that amazing kind of customer experience that you would love to create for and deliver for your customers.
Well, folks, we've been listening to Jonathan Shroyer, and he was talking to us about customer experience in the world of diplomacy and businesses. My name is Oral Ofori, your host and producer of the favorite human interest chat show, #The African Dream. We're not done with Jonathan. He's coming on again, and we look forward to having him. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Let's do this again soon.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Have a good day.